Speaking of dolls, making them has been a folk art tradition since 200 BC. And most of us had one as kids growing up, from Cabbage Patch to Raggedy Ann, Barbie and Ken to G.I. Joe. But how did we morph into evil doll movies? Chucky, Annabelle, now Megan. Let's wipe the canvas clean and start with art of a totally different kind. Our first guest can sculpt it, mold it, paint it, create it, and chances are you may have seen some of his work around town. Anthony J. Suber is the latest Houston area resident to be featured in our Cadillac Shaping Houston series.
One of my mentors, Floyd Newsom, who was also one of the founders of Project Row Houses, he was the first example that I saw of a black man who was also an artist and a professor. He told me that I had a responsibility to get out of my space and to do something with my craft and my skill. And I took that as an imperative that I just have run with. My name is Anthony J. Suber. I am a multidisciplinary artist, an educator, and I am from Houston, Texas.
I think it's safe to say he made his mentor proud. Interdisciplinary visual artist and professor Anthony J. Suber joins us to add more color to the canvas of his story. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Deborah?
Good. Good to see you again. All right. When it comes to art, a lot of us can look at a piece and go, I see a meaning there that we can interpret for ourselves. But the art of making art has great meaning to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, as I talked about in that segment, and just part of my philosophy of being an artist is also teaching others to make work, and through mentorship and community activism, connections that I think are beneficial to young artists. I try to taper my career around, a lot of that kind of process.
Yeah, and you learn about culture through the art that you make as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So for me, my work is really rooted in the African diaspora. I always say whenever I have an opportunity to talk about my work that there's also a Southern connection. My family is from East Texas, as I talked about in that segment also. And, those deep roots and connections I think are also what makes my work so important, and allow me to kind of really talk about history.
Yeah, and art got stripped away from so many programs in schools across the country.
Yes.
And I think probably more now than ever, we need that healing property. And to you really see it as healing when you're creating something.
Absolutely. Well, one of the hats that I wear is the creative director of the Black Man Project here in Houston. And one of the things that we try to do is use arts and healing together, combined as a practice in order to heal the community and have opportunities for people to have access to mental health and mental wealth is what we call it.
You get inspiration from everywhere, but some of your muses include your wife and daughters.
Absolutely. Well, my wife Seba has been a great inspiration to me. She's in arts and culture as well, and my daughters are always cheering me on there's a picture of them. Yeah. They're always cheering me along on the sideline. So.
You're born and raised in Crockett, which is about 2 hours north of Houston. You didn't have siblings, but you have plenty of cousins and a big family. Now,
Absolutely.
For a lot of us, the art that we remember we first started with and probably ended with was the Santa Claus with the cotton ball beard. Y'all remember that? You brought that home in kindergarten and said, look what I made. You didn't make that. You just glued some cotton balls on there. What was the first piece of art that you remember that you actually made?
Yeah, I honestly don't remember the very first piece, but more than likely it was a drawing that I probably sat down and did of a character, which is very similar to what I do now as an artist. Yeah. So.
And it's kind of like you kind of had a head start that maybe some of us didn't have. Your dad was an artist and draftsman. Your grandpa was a carpenter. So that idea of putting things together, you kind of combine both of them, because again, when a lot of us think about art, we might think it's painting on a canvas.
Sure.
It's a lot more than that, and you kind of combine those things.
Yeah, I did. I mean, early on, I had examples in my father and my grandfather. My grandfather did a lot of woodworking, and so I watched a lot of what he was doing and tried to mimic so much of it. My father was one of the first inspirations and someone who sat down with me and literally showed me how to do perspective. And, so many of those things and values that he taught me are things that I actually impart in my students now at University of Houston.
And Mama taught you some stuff as well.
Absolutely.
In fact, Mom's here this morning. She's taking some pictures. She goes, can I take some pictures while you're doing this? Yes, but first we're going to have you come on up here and sit down next to your baby. All right, I get it. You're a boy mom. Yeah, I'm a boy mom too, right? All right, so when you noticed that he had a gift of art, that it was beyond the cotton ball Santa Claus, you leaned into it for him and helped him consider HSPVA to go to school, which is High School for Performing and Visual Arts at the time, now Kinder.
So he really wanted to go to HSPVA. At that time, we were living in Fort Bend County. He was attending Fort Bend schools, and they did not have an art program. And so I had to take him out of Fort Bend, put him in HISD, use my mom's address so that he could apply to go to HSPVA.
Yeah. But that just shows the commitment that you made. And I remember even years ago, Matthew Knowles saying, "There's a difference between a child who says I might might want to do something and one who can do something, right? And the sacrifices that you make as parents. And so you made that sacrifice. And a lot of parents would also say, okay, that's nice, honey, that's a nice little hobby, but when are we going to get back to our reading, writing, and arithmetic?
Right.
But you leaned into him wanting to be an artist.
Yes, I did. I saw that he really wanted to go that route, and I never wanted to discourage him from doing what he wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
And she's getting a chance to see second generation HSPVA goer through my oldest daughter who's going.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
just nice. Yeah.
Keep it going. Where were you when I was
Really
trying to get my
proud of
son
her.
in? No, not really. All right, all right. So you can go back to taking pictures, because I know you were
Okay.
want to take some
Thank
pictures and
you.
video there over there.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So then it's to the point where you want to go off to college. You still want to do art. You want this to be your livelihood for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So that's where I met Floyd Newsome. I met him. Actually, I went to University of Houston downtown for a semester. Met Floyd. Really wasn't sure about my direction and trajectory as an artist, and he was one of the ones who was like, "Hey, brother, you got to get out here and do something with this work." And just really saw my talent and really encouraged it. So,
yeah, and then also got your master's so that you could
Absolutely,
teach
yes.
in higher education, University of Houston. All right, we mentioned earlier that the kind of the inspiration in your art, and another part of your DNA is just kind of your pride in your culture and your lineage and your history.
Yes.
Grandma taught you the pride of heritage.
Absolutely. So I want to say that. So I grew up in Houston, but I spent a lot of time in Crockett. And so my grandmother was from Gibbons Hill, which is a recognized historical site. It's a freedom town, original freedom town for African Americans. And, you know, she always imparted so much of that history in us. And so that was one of the things that has really driven my career and allowed me to really tell the narrative of our history.
Yeah, and even the narrative that's told through the land that
Absolutely.
you own.
Yes.
And what that means to your family.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. You are a multi-medium artist, as we say in the business. All right. You create drawings, paintings, collages, sculptures, installations. There's nothing that you see that's a piece of junk, is it? You can always see how
Correct.
you
I could probably even use a doll.
Yeah. Well, you hear that, Megan? All right. Well, maybe we can get Megan and make a piece out of her later. Yeah. All right. You describe your art as Afrofuturism.
Absolutely. Well, I can give an entire lecture on Afrofuturism, but there's a part of Black liberation and freedom that comes from Afrofuturism, and it comes from the idea that we can use our dreams and our desires for the future to really create spaces of liberation and creativity for ourselves.
Yeah, your Project Row House is Artist in Residence, which a lot of people are familiar with. Project Row House is an amazing, amazing place to go see artists do their thing. All right, let's take a look at some of your favorite pieces. One of them is Canopy, and that's an installation at Herman Park. So I mentioned earlier, you may have seen his work and not known it. That's one of the places where people could have seen it.
It is. Yeah, it's a cantilevered monstera plant. Utilizes the idea of mask making, masquerade, but also what it does is invite, or my intention was to invite people to come in and be a part of the sculpture. And so whenever you go inside the piece, that dichroic glass reflects you, but it also reflects all the light shimmering through it. And so, you know, the whole idea of it was to be kind of a spiritual cleansing. Yeah. And it was a nod to ancestors. I actually made that piece and partially in an homage to my father, who had just passed away when I started working on this piece.
And there are a lot of people, I'm sure, who have selfies with that piece right there. All right, Change of Plans.
Yes, that's the one that's next to us. And so that piece I made actually after having a conversation with a gentleman over in Third Ward close to Project Row Houses who was unhoused, and we had some really interesting conversation around the idea of liberation and freedom. And so I modeled this piece after someone who was unhoused, but this idea of liberation being processed through imagination and masking. And so the piece is really just an homage to him. His name was actually Ralph. And so I made 3 other pieces called Ralph the Cosmic Traveler from this series.
Blessed Arrival.
Yes. Blessed Arrival is another piece that I just finished. That one is actually on display at Nicole Longnecker Gallery, which is my latest installation. This is a piece that I started about 2 years ago, and really was to me a nod to the idea of transfiguration, transcendentalism, meditation, spirituality, and also a nod to the importance of water in the African diaspora. And so you can't really see it on that image, but at the bottom of this piece is a room that's flooded with water.
Yeah. What I love about having a local artist is that when you buy a piece, you can get, obviously we connect with it for our reasons, but you can get the inspiration from the actual artist because you're here and you do commission pieces. But let's talk about this last one right up here in front of the coffee table.
Yeah, so that piece is called Fly Me to the Moon. This is a piece that I actually reimagined in 2024 and was based on an older piece that I did called The Griot Mask, and was a part of a series that was very related, but again, a nod to Afrofuturism and the idea of imagination being kind of a key to freedom. And so there's also, throughout all these works, a suitcase meant to symbolize the idea of moving from one space to another. And I always say suitcases for me are always, I have friends out there that will listen to this and laugh, but they're reliquaries. They're places where we put important things, and so we carry them with us.
If you had to just take, what you could, that's right, that's right. I love that, but one bag only. Don't carry
one
baggage.
Bag only.
Don't carry baggage, carry a bag.
Absolutely,
All right.
absolutely.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining us this
Deborah,
morning.
I appreciate it.
For Anthony Suber's full Cadillac Shaping Houston story, log on to shapinghou.com. To keep up with Anthony and his work, visit anthonyjsuber.com.